Sound Speeds, and welcome to the second episode of the as of yet untitled Sound Speeds podcast, the new version that replaces speed bumps. And this is episode 2 of 10 of the pilot test, I should say, that we're going to be doing. And if you have a name suggestion that you would like to submit for this podcast, then please, by all means, write it down below, because I'm definitely interested in a name for this, especially if we continue past 10 episodes. But let's waste no more time and get right into our first topic. In the world of pro sound, there are times that you will just point a microphone at something and record it. And you don't necessarily have to float a microphone over it in order to pick it up adequately. Like, for example, if you're ever working in a place where there's cars driving by, you're not going to hold the boom out over your head and try to, get it over the race car. It's probably going to be in a shot if you do that. So sometimes just holding it on your boom pole and pointing it at what is important is going to be enough, especially if you're trying to point it up in the sky at an airplane or something like that. Now, granted, you might extend out the boom pole to get it off the ground, try to get a little bit of air in it. But if you were just going to pistol grip it, for example, pistol grip and hold a pistol grip and just point a microphone at something, there is a technique that works really well for this application. I'm going to show it to you right now. If you were to point at something, if you just look at something and then point, you don't have to look right down your finger to know you're pointing at that source, do you? The reason why is your brain is able to make calculations from the two eyes that you have right here, where your two eyes are able to triangulate on something wherever it happens to be. And then your body knows that 1 foot down and 1 foot over, whatever, is where you are pointing from when you point at that. So it is able to point your eyes in more or less the same direction as your finger. And that's a calculation your brain does. So if you actually are wondering, if you're able to do this, then just simply look at something like up there and then go, boom. You don't have to look at it with, straight down the barrel of your finger to know you're pointing at it. You can glance over there and go, doom, right there. I know I'm pointing at the word docs on my computer. And then if I look over there, I can say that right there is the boom pole that I'm pointing at. I'm able to see with my eyes. My brain does the calculations and you can point at it. I learned this a long time ago when I was skeet shooting. If you have a skeet and you want to basically have a really, really effective way of skeet shooting, you know that the front doesn't recoil or anything like that. So if you put your hand on the front of it and you lay a finger directly pointing towards the barrel, the end of the barrel, and then you disengage your brain. You don't try to aim with it. You simply point your front finger and pull the trigger. Believe it or not, if you can disengage your brain, you're able to hit clay pigeons 9 out of 10 times. And I kid you not, I was doing this my first time skeet shooting. And simply by going from here and going point, click, not aiming, pointing at it. You point at it and then you pull the trigger. And that was evaporating the clay pigeons. I thought it was fascinating. And then when I started getting into sound, I realized that the microphone did the same kind of thing. So if you have a pistol grip and you want to just have your boom pole on the ground or resting on your foot, which boom operators do a lot, and you want to just point it at something, one of the things I will do is I will hold a pistol grip and I will point my finger straight forward. And then that straight forward is directly in line with where the microphone is pointing. So as long as you hold your boom pole with your finger sticking out, all you have to do is point and the microphone is going to be pointing directly at that source, whatever that happens to be. And you can, once you get that down to a science, rest your finger back over here. And then as soon as you need to point at something, you can sling it out while you point in that particular direction. So you could actually have your eyes closed if you're not wearing your headphones. You can say, oh, the sound source is over there, boom. And you can point right at it and you know it's going to be on mic every single time. So remember that technique, the point technique. For our second topic, we're going to discuss the sound of air. Now, I know that sounds weird, right? But believe it or not, air does have a sound, and it's one that you can hear. If you were to close your eyes and you stood in the middle of an auditorium that was dead quiet, would it sound different than if you were standing in a closet and it was dead quiet? Believe it or not, it does. And the reason why is because air has a sound. That sound is a very high-pitched sound. And if you look at a frequency response chart that basically talks about like where clarity, where you can add and remove boominess or boxiness and clarity, that kind of thing, you're going to be basically looking at frequency, I forgot what it's called now. But there is a chart you can find online that talks about different frequencies that you can add or remove to make different sounds with your audio recording. And if you were to look at one of those charts, it is going to point out air frequencies that are up in the 12,000 hertz range. And the reason why it's way up there at the edge of where some humans that are older can hear, it is the frequency. It's a very high pitch frequency, but it's very directional, and it's one that you can pick up with your ears. Now, air itself, just as it's bouncing around the room, is extremely quiet. You're not going to be able to hear that. The molecules of air, for example, has been estimated at negative 24 decibels. And I think it's the Microsoft, what is it? It's the one in Washington. The Microsoft anechoic chamber, I think, has a noise floor rating. It's the quietest in the world. I think it's like negative 20.35 if memory serves. That is the decibel range, which means that at that point, that every time you double or cut your decibel range, and it's basically increasing or decreasing by 3 dB. So it would need to be basically half as loud to be able to be on the verge of being able to pick up the sound of air molecules bumping off of each other. That is basically negative 24 decibels is the sound of air molecules bouncing off of each other, which we are not able to achieve in the world of noise floors just yet. But that is extremely quiet. Now, the reason I'm mentioning that part is because when we are talking about microphones and we're talking about measuring different sounds, you want to have a quiet environment. When you're talking about doing voiceovers and stuff like that, you want to be in a quiet environment, right? But believe it or not, you can, if you're recording in a closet that you put a bunch of acoustic foam around and it is dead quiet in there, if you speak, your voice basically disappears into the nothingness that is the acoustic foam you have on your wall. And it sounds totally different in that room than it would if you had a bigger room and you spoke in there. Now you may say, but why are whisper rooms only like 4 feet by 4 feet, or they're very, very small? That's true. Most of the time, you don't need to sound like you're in a big auditorium style room that is completely treated, but I'm talking about air here. If you want to hear the sound of air, then what you can do is record in a big room that is dead quiet. Or another option that you have if you want to artificially create a little bit of air is boost up the air frequencies. Or if you don't want to do that because you're like, well, I don't really want to just add this high pitch boost to my voice, which is going to be audible and make it overly sibilant. I don't want to do that. Maybe the sibilance is technically a little bit lower, like what is it, 6 to 8K, something like that. What you can do is create a little bit of just a general type noise. I don't want to say white noise, but you could create white noise if you wanted to, or pink noise or something like that, and then roll off everything except just the air frequencies and bring it up ever so slightly, which is going to create a little bit of a hiss slightly on a very low audio level in just that frequency range. If it's very, very low, like we're talking about the level of the noise floor of the room, negative 68 decibels, negative 65 dB in your audio recording, something like that. And if you were to add just a little bit of a general hiss in that air frequency range, it's going to give the artificial impression to many people subconsciously that you are recording in a room bigger than you are. Do you need to do it? Not necessarily. As a matter of fact, you probably don't. But I'm just telling you that if you wanted to create the idea, an illusion of recording in a room that is much bigger than the room you're actually in, that would be one way to do it. So this was a shorter episode of this new podcast format. There's never really going to be a way of me telling how long this episode is going to be when I produce it. I simply talk about a topic until I feel like it has been discussed and I got my point across. Now, if you would like to submit a question for me to answer in an upcoming episode of this new podcast format, please email me at alan@soundspeeds.us, and that is .us. And let me know what question it is, and I will address it in an upcoming video, unless it's something very, very simple like, oh yeah, your answer is yes, or your answer is no, or I give you a model number of something. Something like that, don't necessarily need to send me. But if you want to ask a question about a boom pole, you want to ask me a question about the way pros do something, you want to hear a story from funny story from set or something like that, just ask a question and I will answer it in an upcoming episode. But thank you for tuning into this second episode of this new podcast type format. And I will, I guess, well, that's it. That's it. Thanks for tuning into this episode, and I will see you in the next one. Have a question you'd like answered or want to add something? Be sure to write it in the comment section down below. You can also make a suggestion for future topics of discussion. Again, comment section down below, or you can email me at soundspeeds@yahoo.com. Be sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you won't miss out on future sound advice.